Så det noen bak der, sånn, og noen løper rundt. Så det greit. Så takk til de som har på en måte drevet fram denne konferansen. Jeg synes det faglige innholdet ser bra ut. Blir det så bra som det ser ut som, så tror jeg det tommel opp. Vi samarbeider jo, det ikke bare vi hadde ikke fått til dette her uten samarbeidet med Nordahl Grieg videregående skole. Og de egentlig her både som foredragsholdere, ledelsen på skolen støtter dette her, og ikke minst så har vi 2 grupper elever. Vi har de som går på IKT-servicefag, som hjelper til med det tekniske her, som fyker rundt, sammen med noen av mine ansatte, som prøver å holde det tekniske opp og gå. Det krevende. Alle som har arrangert litt større konferanser vet at teknikken, det kanskje akilleshælen til mye. Men så langt så går du på skinner, og det veldig bra. Den andre biten at medier- og kommunikasjonelevene her og tar bilder. Så dette kanskje ikke stedet å være hvis du har behov for å være helt anonym. For her kommer det til å bli tatt mye bilder. Det fare for å bli stoppet i gangen og spurt om noe. De skal dokumentere dette her, hele seansen. Og det går selvfølgelig også inn i deres undervisning. Jeg synes det fantastisk morsomt og fantastisk hyggelig at vi klarer å kombinere en konferanse for lærere, men også elever på Nordahl Grieg får utbytte og nytte av hva vi skal gjøre her. Rent som praktisk, så finner dere fullt program her, det håper jeg dere har funnet. Røkeriet og sardinen, det her nede i første etasje. Så det studio i første, andre og tredje i tredje etasje, hvor noen av workshopene kommer til å være. Og dansesalen og redaksjonslokalet i andre etasje. Redaksjonslokalet jo der disse elevene de kommer til med å ha pressekort på seg, så det går an å se dem. Har noen lyst til å twittere, så står hashtaggen der nede. Og rømningsveiene skal man også si noe om. I hvert fall der vi kom ut. Og så tror jeg det ja, og igjen der. Så da vet vi det. Det var omtrent det jeg hadde tenkt å si. Sånn at da tror jeg skal overlate scenen til min gode kollega Vibeke Guttormsgaard, som skal introdusere den neste foredragsholderen. Så en gang til, velkommen til konferanse. Håper dere får mye utbytte av det. Husk også at halvparten, tror jeg, av nytten for en sånn konferanse, det kommer utenom foredragene. Det kommer i pausene, rundt lunsj og både sosiale kveld, hvor man utveksler erfaring og skaffer nye kontakter. Så vel møtt!
Prøver vi å få lyd i den mikrofonen? Det lyd i den nå? Ja, så bra. Det hørte ikke jeg. Da slår jeg opp på engelsk, for nå skal jeg introdusere vår keynote speaker. It's a great honor to introduce our opening keynote speaker, Mr. James Paul G. I think that anyone who's read any theory on games and learning has either read something written by Mr. G or something that references to his work or that is inspired by Professor G's work. He's a great inspiration and an important voice in the field of learning, literacy and video games, and learning especially. James Paul G is a professor at Arizona State University, and he started the Games Learning Society Center at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Professor G is the author of several books. Some of them are What Video Games Can Teach Us About Learning and Literacy, and Video Games Are Good for Your Soul, and The Anti-Education Era, to mention some of them. So, I'm so happy to introduce Professor James Paul G.
See if this headset works. Okay. I feel like a Martian. Okay, this talk is going to be something of a retrospective. When I wrote my first book on video games, which is now about 13 years ago, the whole field of games for learning, games for health, games for social change, that is what is now called Games for Impact, did not really exist. And today, at least in the United States, it more than exists. It's an area of great hype. Lots of startups, big companies and little companies, trying to use games to get them into both school and society for both good and bad purposes. And at least in the United States, this has come down to kind of a debate. There's really two sides. One side is evil, and one side is good. You can guess what side I'm on. Now, the evil side says, let's take this new technology and just use it to do what we already do, but to do it better. That is, to make it shinier, and more exciting, more fun, but basically let's keep the paradigm of our schools. Now, in the United States, the paradigm of our schools, along with the rest of our institutions, is leading to the death of the country for all sorts of reasons. So at least in my view, to do better what we already do is just to march to destruction a little quicker. Now, the other side says this is a new technology and we live in a very new world, which I'll tell you about in a minute, and that we should use this technology to create an entirely new paradigm of learning, not just to do what we did in the past. Now, in order to get to that and describe what that paradigm is and why we would need it, and why we would need it is less clear in Norway than it is in the United States, because in the long line of humanity marching to its destruction, and we all are, you are towards the back of the line. But you'll get to the front. Now, before I start, I want to make it clear that when people who are not gamers think about games, they tend to think about the big commercial games like Halo or Grand Theft Auto, right? And these are not the best places to start if you want to think about games for learning, right? Because they're big, they're long, they're forms of entertainment that obscure what the main potential of games for other things are. So the types of games that one wants to look at in thinking about the future of gaming as a form of learning are not games like Halo, which are too big, but games like Plants and Zombies. Anybody played Plants and Zombies? Okay. Games like Plants and Zombies, or a game like Gone Home. Anybody played Gone Home? Or a game like From Dust. Any one or two From Dusters? Brothers, A Tale of Two Brothers, right? And then this game you recognize, don't you? Because it's made in Norway, Dragon Box. All right, what are these games? Why are they more important to us for what we want to think about than Halo? These are all games that strip the properties of a video game down to its real basics so we can see what it is. And what it is in each of these games, it's about a problem set. There are problems to be solved. So in Dragon Box, it's algebra. And each game marries that problem set to what's called game mechanics. That is, the actions you take to solve the problem. And in the best of games, and what makes a game a good game, is when the problem set, the type of problem you're solving, and the game mechanic, the stuff you do to solve it, are perfectly married. When they are perfectly married, you have what gamers think of as a great game. You also have the best conditions for learning. So these games, where the game mechanics, and by the way, there may be no more brilliantly designed game than Plants and Zombies, which marries a mechanic to a problem set, where the problem set is really as complicated as any real-time strategy game. And yet, you will play that game and you'll see, wow, a very simple game mechanic with a very straightforward problem then ramifies into true complexity, right? By the way, it takes real genius to design these games, so academics are no good at it. So that's just the background. What I want to say now is we live in a world that is truly imperiled, right? In Mexico, recently, a hurricane was going towards Mexico that was the largest, most powerful hurricane in recorded history, right? And the reason we are dying is because of the way in which human beings have set against each other a set of complex systems that are going out of control by our interventions. Global warming, of course, that doesn't exist in the United States, but it does elsewhere. The restructuring of work, by the way, every one of these has been written about copiously. There's no ambiguity. The restructuring of work in America has largely led to very low wages, no unions, no benefits, a tremendous amount of job loss, and also a tremendous amount of work on the fact that with automation, artificial intelligence, we may even have a jobless future. Environmental degradation, well, you live near the ocean. Global conflict, massive flows of immigration, you've seen all this. Casino capitalism, I don't know if you followed this, but today's capitalism is where most of the wealth is created on simple bets that are completely unconnected to productivity. And what this has meant is an absolute unique thing in capitalism. There has always been a relationship in capitalism between productivity, that is the amount of work workers do, and the wealth the society has, but also how much goes back to the workers. So that connection between productivity and wealth, and with some of that wealth coming back to the workers, has been severed. In casino capitalism, productivity of the workers goes up, the wealth in the society goes up, but nothing comes back to the workers, because essentially it's bets on derivatives and credit default swaps and commodities that is simply a casino. It's something that Marx could never have ever seen. There is a lot of literature on the fact that the internet today is so interconnected that it is easy to bring the whole thing down, and in many cases, many cities in the United States, it has been brought down by hacking. The dark web, where not all, but most of the criminal activity takes place, is bigger than the light web by far. Probably the engine of so much of these things is massive inequality, right? That where we are creating a world in which a tiny number of people own most stuff. We've known from economic theory forever that the more inequality there is in a society, the worse their economy and the worse their health, but we are producing this. Just as I came over here, the New York Times had an article about Denmark, because Bernie Sanders is running for president and often holds out Norway and Denmark as examples of social democracies where there's a good deal of equality. And the New York Times pointed out, well, that used to be true, but Denmark today is growing, and I assume you are too. You are growing by several percent greater inequality each year. You're still way better than us, but you're speeding up. Now, the problem is that these systems interact to create a world in which almost all the literature says, here's the only certain thing you can say about it. You can't say anything about it. There's no predictions to be made. The future is going to be utterly unpredictable. It is going to bring tremendous change, either for good or bad. We don't know. It's just not going to be like yesterday, right? So when all the rhetoric we have in the United States is that we ought to prepare kids for jobs, one would like to know what jobs, because we can't predict what jobs will be there, even in the near-term future, and with the possible jobless future, how many jobs there will be. Now, there's an interesting problem here. Human brains are not wired. Human brains are wired to ignore problems like this. The way our brains work, these problems are too big. Right? That's why it's so easy for people to ignore climate change and that stuff, because these very complicated systems just go well beyond how we can really get emotionally attached to a problem. So it's a really deep issue if we want to produce 21st century citizens who are going to be capable of living in this very fast changing and chaotic world. So it's in that context that I am interested in video games. Now, ironically, I'm often cited as a person who said we should bring video games to school, but I've never said that. I said that games create a paradigm of teaching and learning that we should bring to school, whether or not we bring a game. I do think we should bring games to school, but I think we should bring everything to school. We should even bring books to school, right? So I am primarily trying to push a paradigm of teaching and learning that is different from what we do, that I think is much closer to the sort of 21st century pedagogy and curriculum we need for this chaotic world we live in, but also one that will prepare kids to live in that world and to be able to cope with that world. And so let me run through this. It is boring, but nonetheless, we'll run through it. Because I want to show you what this paradigm looks like and as a whole, and then talk about what implications it does have for those bigger problems. All right, first of all, what is a game? A game, whether it's Plants or Zombies or Dragon Box, it's problem solving, right? So one thing is, American schools are focused on memorizing facts. Games are focused on solving problems. But they're focused on solving problems that are well-designed and well-mentored. You know, a lot of liberals in the United States say we should give kids problems, but just turn them loose. They're very creative. Let them do what they do. That doesn't work, right? In fact, problem solving is crucial, but for problem solving to work, the problems have to be well-ordered, well-designed, and kids need mentoring, teaching to do it. And games do that. They design the problems with levels. They design them to start out right so that you're prepared for the future problems. So it's well-mentored, well-designed problem solving. So in games, instead of focusing in facts and information, that you use the facts and information to solve problems as a tool. Now we know from research that if I teach you facts and information directly, you don't retain them very long. But if I make you use them over and over again as tools to solve a problem you want to solve, you retain them and you can solve problems, right? Now, games place their problems in context. This is actually one of the biggest deals. You know, when we assess kids, we give them a test, so-called drop out of the sky test. It shows up, and they got math problems or science problems, but they're in no context. The kid has no idea in what situation does this apply. What is the meaning of this thing? Games always put their problems in a context and build that context in a rich enough way that you know, why am I solving this problem? How does it fit with my goals? Humans tend to learn much better. Good games, and this is almost a mantra to good game designers, encourage you to solve problems in alternative ways. They'll often say, look, that you solved that problem, you beat that boss, but why don't you find another way to do it? And good gamers like to do that, right? They often like to see if they can find their own solutions, not the ones that are in fact sheets or not the ones that are obvious. The games give copious, actionable feedback. In fact, a game is nothing but a set of feedback. I view a game as kind of a conversation. You do something, it does something back. You ask, did I like that or not? And then you do something else. And game is nothing but feedback, but it is feedback that comes back at you where you have some idea what to do next. It's not like when you get your F in algebra and you say, now what do I do, right? It's actionable feedback. One of the things this has been the biggest deal to me as a linguist, because I think it has, in the United States, where we have a lot of trouble with poverty, the most meaningful thing. Games give what I call situational meaning. Now, language can have meaning in two ways. Language can have kind of what I would call dictionary meaning. That is, you can read something and you can say, yeah, I get it, I know what each word means, and you can fill in a definition for each word, but you can have a feeling I have no idea what it really means. If you've ever had a manual to put together a bike or something, you know, wow, I understand every word here, but I can't get this bike together. And that's because there's another type of meaning that words have, which I call situational meaning, and that is where you can associate with a word not just other words, but an image or an action or goals or experiences. Now, it turns out the way the human mind works is that when you can associate with the words in a book or in a text or in a game, or even the symbols in mathematics, you can, an image, an action, experience, and goals, you understand it very deeply, right? So I've often said that when you hand a kid a science textbook in school, and all the kid has is verbal meanings, he can fill in definitions, but he doesn't know, he can't associate an image or an action or experience with any of those words because he hasn't done anything. It's like giving him a game manual without the game, right? Because the game is what gives meaning to the game manual. It's the images and actions that give meaning to those words. And therefore, the game manual is pretty useless if you've never played the game. That's true of a science textbook. Pretty useless if you haven't played enough science to be able to give situational meanings. Now, I will tell you that that is the key way to get poor kids to fail in school. And sure, the rich kids have had a lot of experiences so that the words they see have situational meaning, and ensure the poor kids have not had a lot of experiences, so the books they have only verbal meaning. All right, games, and this happens in the commercial industry, because they have data exhaust, because you can collect a lot of data about what the player is doing on multiple variables, they allow us to compare across hundreds or millions of other players how you did. Not on one variable, but dozens, and not at one time, but across time, right? That means in assessment, we have the opportunity to assess you by saying, here is how you are doing in comparison to millions of other people's on 40 variables across time. And here's the trajectory of growth you're on. And by the way, this is a good one. But there are other trajectories to growth and mastery here, some of which involve more innovative solutions. Would you like to try one of those? Right? So now assessment becomes about growth, development, alternative solutions. It is about you being able to judge where you are. It's not a drop out of the sky test. There is a crucial concept that Dan Schwartz and John Bransford developed years ago called preparation for future learning. Right? There is a way to assess people in school, in let's say algebra, that doesn't ask how much algebra do you know, or not even, and given this lesson, how much algebra did you learn, but ask, given that you took this lesson, how well did it prepare you to learn algebra the next time? Right? And it shows some kid might have on a lesson got a 70% on his algebra lesson, but the next time that prepared him so well, he's got 100%. Now, in a world in which you're going to have to learn over and over, things are going to change, being well prepared to learn is very important. Right? Who cares if your kid got a 70 if later he's going to master it, right? So games, of course, are all about preparation for future learning because that's what level design is. A level is designed to have it's a theory of a trajectory towards mastery. What are the steps that get you from a beginner to a world beater? But what do you need to know to get to level 2 successfully? That's what's taught in level 1, right? And you don't get out of level 1 until they say, well, you're at least well prepared enough to deal with the problems in level 2, right? So in a sense, games are all about preparation for future learning with a theory. Level design is a theory of where you should go and how you should get there. Games customize to different learners in several ways. They can be put on different difficulty levels. They give alternative routes to solutions, so you can use sometimes strategies that work well for you and avoid some of the strategies that you're no good at. And of course, you can also play socially and collaboratively, and partner and have people supplement you so that you together have more expertise than you do alone. Games are a type of simulation, of course, and we've been using simulations in science. By the way, the standard way of those complex systems that I put on the board in physics or in any science that studies complex systems, you can't use experiments, right? Because there's too many variables to control. So they're often studied through simulations and then trying to see how the simulation runs and then come to understand it. Games are simulations, but they're simulations of a very interesting sort because many games allow you to take and alternate between two different perspectives. A perspective, like think of a game like Civilization or Age of Empires. One perspective is the inside one. You're in the action. You are sitting in a place just as you are in the real world. See, the perspective I have now, I'm in here, I'm in the ground to practice. This is the inside perspective. But they also let you switch to a God perspective where you can look down on the whole big picture, right? That's a very powerful cognitive device where if I'm learning something, whether it's ecology or molecules or the universe, being able to be in it and the inside, say, what does it look like from this place? And then being able to go to the top to say, what does that place look like in the whole picture? That switching of perspectives cognitively is quite good. Finally, and this has been written about a lot, failure in games is a source of learning. It's a source of feedback. Gamers do not want to play games where they're never going to fail. See, imagine your kid comes up and says, Mrs. Smith, I'm leaving your algebra class because I have not had one failure in this class. It's totally unacceptable. But you know, if you get a game and you beat all the bosses the first time, you just return it, right? Who would want to do it? Failure is an incredibly important source of learning. It has been argued that in engineering is a failure-based form of learning. You want to fail on your cardboard bridge, right, before you fail on the real bridge. IDEO, one of the biggest companies in the world, has as its motto, fail early and fail often, right? Because the only way to find innovative solutions is to try ones that fail. Schools that punish failure or make people think that failure is the source of being a bad student are going to get uncreative students. Games allow, you know, there is a very important phenomenon in human learning which really makes a lot of assessment nonsense, and it's called U-shape development. And a lot of important stuff, here's how humans develop, not just children, even us adults. You start out and you learn something and you look good. Then you keep learning more and more, and you have to reorganize your mind to go to the next level. Right? You're beginning to learn stuff. Now you want to move up the chain, and that often involves a cognitive reorganization. And when you're doing that cognitive reorganization, trying to get the patterns better, kind of really psych this thing out, your performance goes down. And it's the sign of learning. And then, as you've reorganized it, you go up again. So it's U. What happens when you take the drop out of the sky test at the bottom of the U? The very time you're showing the deepest sign of learning, that is reorganizing to be more efficient in your learning, to be more theoretical, you got your F. Because games are about progress through time, about development, about trajectories, they give us enough of the picture that we can tell whether somebody is doing U-shaped learning or just failing. Games can... This is a big interest in the United States now. I don't know if in Norway you guys have had all this kind of mania about so-called non-cognitive skills. Have you heard this stuff? Paul Tuff's book, How Children Succeed. Well, this all comes from, do you guys remember the marshmallow experiments with 3-year-olds? Years ago, a guy did a very famous experiment, and he went in to little 3-year-olds and he put a marshmallow out and he said, look, you can have that marshmallow anytime you want, but I got to go get something. If you don't eat the marshmallow, when I come back, I'll give you another one. You'll have 2. And some kids, I would have been one of them, grabbed the marshmallow and ate it. Others waited. They showed delayed gratification. Now, he showed that the kids, the 3-year-olds that were able to wait, ended up correlated later with school success. Right? And the kids would have strategies of how to wait because they wanted the marshmallow. One was they'd not look at it, or they'd pretend there was a frame around it. They'd do they use cognitive things to try to. Now that simple skill of delayed gratification correlated not only with school success but life success. And this current literature has begun to show there's a set of what are called non-cognitive skills. It's a terrible word. They sometimes are called dispositions. And these skills are things like delayed gratification, but especially one called grit, which is passion and persistence, persisting past failure and persevering. Now, the set of non-cognitive skills, most 3-year-olds have them already. They're on the way to getting them. They're foundational to school success. Kids who live in chaotic environments or in poverty environments often do not have them. And however, they are teachable. They are malleable. And the interesting thing about them is while they correlate very well with school success and society success, they are malleable and teachable, but they correlate with school success and society success better than IQ does. So if you think IQ isn't malleable, it is. But if you think it wasn't, it doesn't matter, because these non-cognitive skills, which are the very foundation of learning. So, by the way, this would say for small children, if they have not got this set of non-cognitive skills, you are pretty much wasting a lot of time unless you give them to them, right? Because they're foundational learning. Luckily, you can. Well, one great way to give them to them is quit stressing them out. But there's others. So people have been very, if you're a gamer, you know you can't play games if you can't put up with frustration, challenge, if you don't persist and persevere, and if you can't delay gratification until you've earned the reward. And so people are beginning to say, can we use games to teach things like grit? It interests me, especially with some of the work you guys are doing, that you can assess a lot of different things with games. You can certainly assess a problem domain. You can assess ethical thinking, because you can build the problem set to be about ethics. Strategic thinking, thinking about complex systems, like civilization forces you to think about building a civilization from the earliest age to the nuclear age with all of its components, which is truly a complex system. And you can also use games for people to try out different perspectives on the world, right? So it means maybe we can get out of our cognitive mold and say the only thing that's important are the facts people know, and begin to say, what are you as a person? Games are not just about passing. There's really no gentleman's C in a game. They are about mastery. The game encourages you to play it again until you get better and better, to play it on a harder difficulty level, because it says, we're going to be fair, we're going to work your butt off, but you can get to mastery. Imagine a school in which the kid said, passed your algebra class and says, now let's do it again, but at a harder level. One thing that I think destroys American schools, because of the fact we have kids in the school with such different levels of preparation, is we use time as a measure of learning. Everybody's got to learn the same thing in the same time. So if you came with no background in math and you learned a lot in 13 weeks, but I came already with a good background in math and I learned less than you in the 13 weeks, I still get a better grade, right? Because it's whoever ended up knowing more at the end of the 13 weeks, regardless of where you started. Now, games do not, and by the way, this is true of all learning in the modern world, they do not use time as the measure of learning, they use performance. In a game, if you succeed on Halo on hard, and you took 6 weeks longer than me, I'm not better than you. We're both really good at Halo. Nobody says, oh, wow, you were 6. It's like if, you took a lot longer. If you let middle school kids, say, build a bomb, if the bomb goes off, like a nuclear bomb, they know physics, right? And you're not going to say, whoa, it's too bad that it took them so long to learn that much physics. Or, by the way, are you going to say, let's give them a physics test? Right. Notice, by the way, that this is showing the troubles when you have problem solving. If your middle school kids built a nuclear bomb and got it to go off, you'd say, you couldn't say, too bad I couldn't give them a physics test, because the proof is in the pudding. It takes a lot of physics to. Now, maybe a safety test. You should have wished you'd give them that. But all right. Games allow projective identities. This is something I've written about. What this means is the game often gives you an avatar, and the avatar has goals. The game designer said you got to do some stuff. But like in any educational system, the player, just like kids in your school, could say, those are your goals, they aren't mine, why should I do them, right? So the game realizes I've got to get you to buy into the goals. So it does that by getting you to buy into the avatar, right? You say, oh, I want to beat Garrett and the thief. Therefore, I will accept his goals. But it also allows you to play the game in your own way and create some of your own goals. So you project yourself onto Garrett. You accept Garrett as a project, something you're going to work at, but you also project onto him some of your own goals. You might say, I'm going to go through the entire game and never kill anybody, right? So that way in which you can project yourself into the game, accept the goals, and even make up some of your own, that gets you the buy-in that you really need. We do know from human learning that kids only learn well in a problem space where they have lucid goals. But you also want people to be able to rethink their goals, right? I mean, think about George Bush invading Iraq. He didn't have a lucid goal. He didn't understand half of what he was doing, but he stuck to it without ever rethinking it. Pretty disastrous. What a game does is it says, know what your goal is, it's lucid, but if things aren't working, feel free to rethink it, right? Games are a version of model-based thinking. Good. I got my 10-minute marker. I can tell how the time is going by how many people fall asleep. Model-based thinking is the very basis of science. But a game is just a simulation. It's a set of rules. It's a model of something. And to play it, you have to figure out what the rules are, how they interact, and how you can get them to interact in your favor. And that really is an example, as Will Wright has pointed out, of model-based thinking, the very, very basis of science. Now, finally, if you've got a game-based paradigm, the game is only a part of the paradigm. I've talked about a thing I call big G games. Little G games is the game, the software. You buy Plants and Zombies or Dragon Box. Now you got the little G game. But the learning comes not from playing the game alone, but from everything else that you put on. What are all the other activities you're going to do? How are kids going to interact and socialize with each other around the game? Are they going to go to websites and get more information? Are they going to learn to mod the game? You see, in the commercial industry, there's always a plethora of sites around games and socialization around games that people are doing, because people are playing them in multiplayer, they're collaborating, they're going to sites to study and to mod them. That entire penumbra of activities around the game and the game itself is what I call the big G game. And you as teachers are not designing the game, you are designing the big G game. You are picking the game and you're saying, okay, now what am I going to build around it? How am I going to link it to the rest of my curriculum? How am I going to get other activities at some? Am I going to use the game for preparation for future learning and do other? Am I going to use so you're trying to design teaching and learning systems. In fact, my view is the principles I've just showed you, which are the basic principles of good game design, they are also exactly the principles of good design that teachers should be doing for teaching and learning in the class. Modern teachers are designers. They are designing systems of learning and teaching like the ones we have just seen. If you're allowed to be a professional. Now, what is this? That's nice. Let me close with this. So I told you in the beginning that we're in an imperiled world. Right, and so I'd love us all to do better teaching algebra, teaching STEM, teaching art, but we've got to do more than that. We have got to get citizens who are prepared for this chaotic world. You know, in the literature about the chaotic world, people have said, look, you know, we had as a very strong value sustainability. Right, sustainability means how do we go through change with our institutions and our environment, but keep a common core set of values. And the people writing this literature says, too late for that. We've ignored the problem so long, there will be no sustainability. So there's now a whole new body about a thing called resilience. Resilience is being able to cope with change and change with it for the better. So the goal can't any longer be, I get to keep all my core values. The thing is now it's going to be a lot of change, be flexible to change, but also have a whole set of strategies of how to leverage change to make something better. And so that's kind of the new theme. Now, games have, I'm sure a lot of you know this, they have become part of this larger movement to let everyday people without credentials build knowledge. So this is a game called Fold It, in which scientists who try to discover the proper fold for proteins. You can figure out the chemicals in a protein, and they might have hundreds, but it's not too hard to figure out what chemicals are in them. But they only have their effect when they fold into a certain 3D shape. The trouble is, hundreds of chemicals could fold into literally billions upon billions of different shapes. And you've got to know which is the shape that gives the protein its effect. It's its lowest energy shape. And so scientists, and by the way, these proteins, they're everything good and bad happening in your body right now are proteins. You really ought to care about these guys and take care of them. And one good way to take care of proteins, just free advice, don't eat at McDonald's. Now, so they just use massive computers and churn through, seeing if they can discover it. And some guy had the idea, let's make a little game where people can fold the proteins. And any time they find a fold that is low energy, it'll turn blue. And then human pattern recognition allow them to discover the fold, right? And typical of gamer communities, the people who did this, they aren't chemists, they don't know any chemistry, they began to get into guilds. They began to share solutions with each other. They began to share some chemistry they got on the internet with each other. They began to do it mutually. And this has been very successful. In the last competition, where scientists brought their supercomputers to a competition to see who could solve an unknown protein the quickest, the players of this game won 7 of the top 10 slots. They have had 2 articles in Nature, the most prestigious science journal, the players, longest number of names in an article ever. And 2 years ago, they discovered the proper fold for the protein that causes AIDS, which has eluded science for 20 years. They're amateurs, no degrees needed. They're organized around the technology of problem solving with a social game, a big G game, and off they go. Now, not all of these are games, but they work. This is Galaxy Zoo, where everyday citizens were said you want to help, classify galaxies because they got so much data on this. There's millions of them, billions of them. So just look through the pictures, help us classify it. Typical human beings, no degrees, get together, form guilds, socialize, set up learning, set up teaching, and not only have they classified a lot of galaxies, they have managed to discover whole new categories of galaxies. Galaxies that scientists knew nothing about. They have published several hundred papers. They have been cited several thousands of times by official scientists. No degrees here. This is part of the maker movement where you don't need a degree, you just need to be well organized. It's really imperiling people like me with a degree. All right. Now, this is a phenomena. Notice these people are getting there. They're getting a good tool. Then they're socializing around the tool. Then they're getting websites. And then they're putting up tutorials. They're helping each other. They're teaching. They're mentoring. They're linking to other stuff. This happens with games like Dota 2. If you go on Dota 2, you'll see a myriad of websites in which the players have made tutorials. You can get a coach. You can get annotated play. You can learn and teach in any way you want. You can go do it together. You can get some guy to come in the game with you and teach you. What we're seeing today out of school is people without degrees coming together to create distributed teaching and learning systems, making their own tools, teaching each other. It's custom. You want a lecture? Here it is. You want a tutorial? Here. You want a code? Here it is. copious materials organized around very complicated problems, and they don't ever get a test from a big test company. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Jim. Very, very good start to the conference. I definitely think so.
Would you ever come up here and say, well, that was really a shitty talk, and the conference might get better, hopefully?
No, I wouldn't.
Yeah.
We have time for a couple of questions, but there will be a follow-up session at 12 o'clock on this stage, where you and Tobias Stobby will have a peisprat. So, is there any questions? These are Norwegians. We're not really into asking questions after presentations. And you can ask questions later. So thank you so much. Here's
I got
a little gift. It's cardboard glasses.
Okay.
So
good. Thank you
with
very
a little
much.
note in
That's great.
where you can find some apps.
Thank you
Thank
very
you so
much.
much. Da det en liten kaffepause, og så fortsetter det parallellsesjoner, presentasjoner her og workshopper rundt omkring i de andre rommene.